Hi everyone, David and Gino here, taking a look at one of the undercard stakes races on Whitney Saturday at Saratoga. Race 9, part of that mandatory payout pick 5 sequence, kicks off the late pick 5. It is the Lure Stakes, going a mile and a 16th on the inner turf course. A restricted stakes, and the conditions for this one are for horses who have not won a graded stake so far in 2024. And as we throw up the field for this race, that is why the number 9, More Than Looks, is eligible for this race. He was a grade 3 winner last year as a 3-year-old and ran a respectable 6th in the grade 1 Breeders' Cup Mile. Has been off since then, but Cherie DeVaux, I think, has picked out a good spot for him to make his belated 2024 debut.
And you know I'm ready for Saturday. You can see I'm rocking my DRF logo, Old Smok clothing t-shirt that you can get. Cheap plug at oldsmokeclothing.com/DRF. One thing we've learned early on about Cherie is that she, as expected, coming from the Chad Brown learning tree, she does a fantastic job getting horses ready off a long layoff too. So it's not as if this is something where she's the type of barn that probably will give him a race or two. This horse could come off the bench firing. We actually saw earlier in the year a heavy favorite, She Feels Pretty, 3-5 favorite, come back in a spot sort of like this at Pimlico, a softer spot, and get the job done winning. So certainly a barn that can get horses ready to fire off a long layoff.
More Than Looks drawn the outside post in this field, entered for turf. 9 of those entered for turf. The 10, Film Star, do note, is a main track only entrant, so he unlikely to participate unless there is unfortunate rain on Saturday. More Than Looks, though, Gino, we'll take a look at the Timeform US pace projector, because I think that's going to be critical to this horse's chances, how the pace does develop, because he is the epitome of a pace-dependent horse. He is a deep, deep closer who drops back to last and tries to launch that big stretch rally. No surprise that he has that LP flag over his chiclet on the pace projector, indicating that he has the highest Timeform US late pace rating in the field. But looking towards the right of the screen at the horses who could be on the lead, I think it really is incumbent on those horses to engage in a pace. The 3, Swift Shores, a horse trying turf for the first time, and the number 5, Big Everest, who we've seen time and again does his best running when he can get clear on the front end. If those two hook up, it's going to set the table for a horse like More Than Looks.
Yeah, and if you're trying to play against a horse like More Than Looks, that would be the way you're playing against him. You're saying he's coming off that long layoff, and he's probably just going to be coming from way out of it. So he'll need a little bit of racing luck or a pace to run at, and he'll need to be at his absolute best, making his first start this year and his first start in quite some time, since November of last year. So these are the types of short price horses that when they're starting like this and they're maybe a little trip compromised, probably horses that in the long run you want to take shots against, especially if they're going to be like horses under 2-1 here. Certainly classy and More Than Looks, but we'll take a little swing against him.
Well, if you are trying to beat the favorite here, I think there are a wealth of options, because it's a very competitive Lure Stakes once you get past that layoff runner. Let's begin by taking a look at the number 1, Kubrick, and tough runner to assess going up for the Chad Brown barn, because he was so impressive winning his seasonal debut at Tampa. First start for the Chad Brown barn, beating a solid optional claiming field at the time. They threw him into the deep end of the pool next time in the grade 1 Maker's Mark. It didn't work out. He was placed closer to an honest pace that day and faded towards the end. And then in the poker last time, got no pace to close into, but still didn't do much running through the stretch. So hard to really peg this horse from a quality standpoint.
And separately, I could take both of those races, and if he didn't win either of those races, I'd be fine with it. As you were pointing out, the Maker's Mark, that's a tough field. Maybe he's just in a little too tough that day. And then last time out, he's very much pace compromised. He's getting no pace to run at in a race that's won by a gate-to-wire winner. But I think putting them both together, I just wanted to see more from him in either of those spots. Like, I didn't expect him to win, maybe either, but I just wanted more from him, more fight, more finish, and we just didn't get it. I thought both of those races were really lackluster, really disappointing. He is a Group 3 winner in France. He'll get to save ground from the rail in here, but I just need to see a little bit more before I can warm up to him in this spot.
The number 2 is Forever Super. He is coming off a blowout victory at Laurel in the Prince George's County Stakes. We'll take a look at the replay of that race, and he really never had an anxious moment this day. There was no speed in the race. He got to the front end soon after the start, was able to back down the pace, and just draws off as much the best on this day. But he's a horse who has really been in great form recently for trainer Michael Trombetta. He's won 3 of his last 5, and you could argue that if the trips had worked out a little better, he could have won 5 in a row, because you go 3 back in that Henry Clark. He was in traffic through most of the stretch drive and altered course when the race was already over at about the 16th pole, and then 2 back in the cliffhanger. He was kind of stuck out 3 wide every step of the way, 3 wide, no cover around both turns. That's not an ideal trip. Once again, got run down by Dataman that day, showed what he could do last time running a competitive speed figure when getting a more favorable trip. He's drawn well towards the inside, can get that stalking journey potentially in behind those 2 speeds. So I think he's a pretty dangerous horse coming in here for a trainer who does pretty well when he ships into Saratoga.
For a horse who's a little bit of a price, he checks a lot of the boxes that you want for a live price horse. As you were pointing out, his form is fantastic right now. So yeah, he's stepping up, probably facing a little bit tougher here, but he's not going into like true graded stakes company. He's facing horses that are probably a little below that or not necessarily in their best form right now. You put a line through that race at Keeneland in October of last year. That was a sloppy track that was rained off the turf. He has like 10 straight turf races that are really honest. You can't knock any of them. So he'll give you a nice run for your money. He'll put himself in the race. Even a horse that he lost to 2 and 3 starts back, Dataman. A lot of people like Dataman in the Grade 2 United Nations most recently too. Like he was a live horse there. So I think he fits well. And if he is 6-1 at around that price or above, I think he's an absolute player in here, a fair horse, and definitely the type of horse you're looking for in late exotics. I know this kicks off the late pick 5. It's in the middle of that mandatory payout pick 5, which is an all stakes pick 5. And I think it's also part of the 2-day pick 5 as well, the Friday, Saturday one. So this is one of those really important races that you want to be right about. And I think Forever Super is going to make his way onto a lot of those multi-race tickets. These are horses at prices you're looking for in sequences like this.
The number 3 is Swift Shore, and he's sort of a critical horse to the fortunes of More Than Looks. If he takes to the turf and is able to show that dirt speed transitioning to the grass, he could have a real say in how the pace of this race shakes out. As far as his chances of being successful in this race switching over to the turf, hard to be too optimistic looking at his pedigree. There's really not a whole lot of turf on the dam side. He is by Uncle Mo out of a Speightstown mare, so there obviously is some turf there. And when you watch him run, he's got a little bit of that bouncy turf reaction to his stride, like a lot of the Uncle Mo progeny do. That's, one of the reasons why it seems like the Uncle Mo horses do so well on the turf. But still, this horse might have to move up and be better on the turf than his recent dirt form to be successful here.
Yeah, I agree with you. He seems a little one-dimensional. You pointed out the dam never turf, no direct siblings on the turf on the dam side that tried turf. And then from a pace standpoint, we see this sometimes with horses trying new surfaces. Sometimes if a horse doesn't like a new surface, they don't even show their speed. Like that they've shown on a different surface. That would be my only kind of question about him in here, because if he doesn't show speed for some reason, maybe he doesn't take to the grass, then Big Everest could actually have a pretty strong say in this race if he were the one to get out front and be able to dictate it and not get pushed at all. But in my head, I'm projecting Swiftsure to be forwardly placed in here and to make life a little more difficult on Big Everest. So I just don't think it really sets up all that well for the 2 horses that I'm projecting as main speeds.
The number 4 is Irish Aces, and we'll take a look at his most recent start at Saratoga, going at the same distance on the inner turf course, albeit against Optional Claiming Company. Didn't get the best run through the stretch this day. He's the horse in the red silks with that white face, the chestnut. And you could see Tyler Gaffalione just really has nowhere to go at about the 8th pole here. He made all the right moves prior to this, getting this horse over to the rail to save ground, but just couldn't find a clear path for about the first furlong of the stretch until about here. He finally gets out, is finishing well when he gets some daylight ahead of him, but it's just too late. He can't catch the winners that day. This horse had been in some tough spots prior to that, had run respectably against some good stakes horses in the Arlington 2-back. That was a race where he kind of fell into a trip that's a little bit atypical for him, pressing the pace. He's a horse that really wants to get held up and make that late run. I still thought he ran well in the Arlington considering that trip, and he was just in some tough spots prior to that. So I think there's a case to be made for this horse. We'll see what kind of price he is coming off that pretty obvious trip last time.
Yeah, that's the key, right? The price for him, because I think class wise, he fits very well in this spot. He even had some congestion early in that race, too, and he probably had to settle farther back than where they initially wanted because he has some races where he shows a little bit of kind of tactical positional speed where he can be more involved in the race. But that was the problem that he had in the Tampa Bay Derby. He had some traffic that day in the Munoz. He didn't have the best of trips and he ran into I'm very busy when I'm very busy, really freaked that day. So he beat you see Irish Ace is going to go third start of the form cycle now, and a horse who I think should run well. He was behind Ottoman Fleet. Ottoman Fleet came out of that one to win and to show really good form coming out. So I'm going to use Irish Aces in the under spots. The real key is, as you said, if he's 5-1, 6-1, I think he's bettable in here. If he's 7-2, or a little bit shorter even because of that recent trip, then he's probably a little bit lower than what you'd want to play in this race.
Another horse who could be in that same price range is the number 5 Big Everest, who you mentioned earlier. His fortunes really depending on Swift Shore and if he takes to the turf and is able to show that speed, because we'll take a look at Big Everest's most recent start when he led in gate to wire fashion, as he likes to do in this optional claiming race, going the same mile and a 16th distance at Aqueduct last time. And he is a horse who has been somewhat of an Aqueduct specialist over the years. He really loves the turf courses there, and it racked up another victory here. He can be something of an all or nothing type. You see that in his career box in the racing form. He's got 9 victories in 18 starts and just 3 seconds and thirds to go along with that. When he shows up, he's pretty game through the stretch and doesn't like to let horses pass him. But sometimes if he gets a little pressure, doesn't fall into the right trip, he won't be around at the end. So one that's a little difficult to use in exotic wagers if you're trying to play exactas and trifectas, be aware of that. But if the trip works out, he can be a dangerous horse to win it all.
I love horses like this from a handicapping standpoint because you pretty much know what you're going to get from him. He makes our job a little bit easier some of the time because in a day and age where we're not sure many times if this horse is going to show speed or if that horse is going to show speed, Big Everest almost always shows speed and he puts himself in the race. And just like you said, if there's other speed and if the pace is a little too hot, he wilts and he backs up. But if he gets a fair pace to where there's not a lot of other contention, then he can win that race, and he fits at this level. They don't usually go up into the graded stakes level with him, and I think they know him pretty well. They know what he is, they know who he is, and I really respect when a horse gets conditioned like this. So I think it's a great spot for him. I think he'll run his race. I think he'll get out front, and he's a horse that you just have to play it out. Do you think Swift Sure will make life difficult for him? I'm still a little concerned just because of the connections that he gets a little overbet sometimes for his actual chances of winning. But, I think the race goes through him because I'm more convinced that we're going to get his speed on the turf than Swift Sure's on the turf. So Big Everest, at least an underplayer.
The number 6, Johnny's Fireball, is going to be a long shot in this race. He's kind of got some inconsistent form coming into here. He won a weaker optional claiming race 2 back at Churchill Downs with a pretty good trip up close to a pace that was on the moderate side. And last time, just not really good enough against some better horses in the Wise Dan. Now switching over to Saratoga after running at Churchill Downs recently. That can be somewhat of a quirky turf course, and his form was a little bit up and down on that course coming into this race. So he's just going to have to step up his game overall. Not a bad horse, just I think even his best race might be a cut below what we're going to see from some of the top contenders here.
And he feels to me like a real trip horse. Like his best races come when he can sit very close to a soft pace when they're going a little bit longer. He kind of falls into wins, or he falls into really good efforts based on the race shape. And as we're plotting out here with Swiftsure, with Big Everest, maybe he can sit third, like right behind him and fall into it. But even then, I think from a class standpoint, he's still a cut below these. So yeah, I think he's a little bit underneath, and I'm not sure if he'll get that trip he needs in here to be able to really capitalize on a group like this.
The number 7, Pioneering Spirit, was really in great form when he came to Saratoga last year. He was in the midst of a win streak for Linda Rice and actually earned a stakes victory going the mile and the 16th at Saratoga last summer in the Bernard Baruch towards the end of the meet. He has not been so successful since then, since coming back for his 5-year-old season in 2024. He's yet to win a race, yet to even be part of the exacta through 5 starts, but he has been in some tough spots, and Linda's tried all different distances with him. He really wanted no part of the 2 miles last time in the Belmont Gold Cup. They cut him back to a distance more like this in an optional claiming race a couple of weeks ago, and I thought he was running on pretty well towards the end. That was a race where I think horses kept coming up the inside did well. The winner, Major Dude, found a seam towards the rail, and Pioneering Spirit had to angle widest of all in the stretch, and he was really finishing towards the end and galloped out very strongly past the wire. For those that are interested in gallop outs, maybe he's starting to round into form for Linda, and he is reunited with Jose Ortiz for this race, who was 5 for 5 on him last year when he was riding this horse since he came into Linda Rice's barn.
He was the most difficult read for me in this race because of some of the things you were pointing out. Like, he's capable of some big races, and big races at Saratoga, like we saw last year, which has to be a major positive in a race like this. I thought his last race, yeah, he hopped at the start. He got squeezed out of a spot, and he was showing some late momentum, which I appreciated there. And it does feel like he's moving back into form. Maybe that match race kind of messes with you a little bit sometimes when you have to run a race like that. It maybe took a little bit out of him coming out of that race for a while, but at the price, I can warm up to him and I can include him in some of the late exotics, because you said he's not as consistent of a horse most recently, but these are horses that I like betting when you know they have a ceiling. Like, you know, there's an A game that Pioneer and Spirit can show up with that's pretty close to the top of everyone else in this field, just if you're talking about speed figures. So yeah, if this is a race where you're trying to beat more than looks and you're using a few prices, he would be one that I would also want to throw in.
The number 8 is Smok and Teague, and he is actually last year's Lure winner. Got the job done in 2023, fending off Dakota Gold and Portfolio Company in an exciting running of this race, winning by a neck. Later became a graded stakes winner in the second half of the season when he took down the River City, but with the calendar turning to 2024, he becomes eligible for this race once again, since he has not won a graded stakes so far this year. And Gino, his form started off pretty strong. He won the Appleton at Gulfstream. A couple of races at Churchill recently. I thought he ran well in the opening verse. His Arlington last time left me a little bit cold. I didn't see a major excuse that day. He's been getting a little keen and rank early in his races, which I don't remember seeing from him so much early in his career. So that bothered me a little bit, but no doubt on this horse's best day, he's a major player.
Yeah, and I got to be honest, like, I like him in here. I don't really have very much of an excuse for him in his last start. He was in a little bit of an uncomfortable spot early in between horses, and he backed up, and then he just didn't fire. So it wasn't like there was this overwhelming trouble or anything that you're going to look to. But what I like is coming out of that, it was not long. They gave him a month, let him freshen up a little bit, and then July 6th, he's back on the tab. July 6th, July 13th, July 20th, July 27th. We get a nice pattern coming into this. And as you pointed out, this is a really good level for him. This is a good spot. He won this race last year. He's probably, even though he is a graded stakes winner, he's probably a cut below like the true graded stakes types. And this feels like a class spot that is just a really good level for him. So I'm just going to hope that, you know, he was a little bit flat in that last race. They gave him a month off. There was no real issues. They came back. This is a spot he's run well before. And, you know, as gamblers, because of that last race, it's just going to offer us better value on him. So if he runs second or third there, maybe he's 7-2 in this race, and maybe he's one of the major players. But because he was a little disappointing in that effort, you know, he might be double the price of that. And I look back to Carl Spackler, Talk of the Nation. Those horses are probably just a little better than him, right? They're probably just a cut above him. So I don't mind that third place effort there. I'm just hoping that it wasn't him actually tailing off, and it was just a flat performance that we do see from horses from time to time on that June 1st race last out at Churchill.
And then the horse to beat, the number 9, More Than Looks, drawn in the outside post position. As we were saying earlier, the vulnerability with this horse is twofold. He's coming off the layoff, so there are always questions about whether he's going to be the same horse after all this time away. Obviously had a setback. He was training at fairgrounds over the winter, then missed about 3 months of workouts before coming back over the summer. And he's a horse that has no early speed. So he really is dependent on how the paces work out. And it should be noted, in his 2 most impressive victories last year, the Manila and the Jefferson Cup at Churchill, I looked those races up in Timeform US. Red color-coded pace figures for both of those races, indicating that they were legitimately fast paces that set up his big late kick. And I think it's not a given that this race is going to be that same kind of setup. And we'll see. He is the most talented horse in this race, no doubt about it. The speed figures say that. His 2-length loss in the Breeders' Cup Mile, I thought, was an underrated effort at the end of last season. And as you were alluding to earlier, Cherie DeVaux has excellent numbers coming off layoffs. If you look those up in DRF Formulator, just have those concerns about still the layoff, even with those good stats and his running style.
Yeah, this is the type of horse who I could never bet to win or single in this type of a spot coming off a long layoff like this with his running style. He's the type of horse who, if he runs really well here and wins this race, then you perk up and you go, wow, that was probably the race he wasn't supposed to win. So his next start may be even a little bit better. And yeah, I've just been so impressed with DeVaux and what she's done over the last few years. You've just really seen it with horses at all levels, sprinters, dirt horses, classic style horses going long on the turf. It's not like she's even pigeonholed to one particular type of horses where we see some good barns that are good with first timers or good with turf horses. She's just flat out good. And More Than Looks is a nice horse. And I'm going to use him, David, in the second spot because I think he's the horse to beat, but I can really see him running on late for a good second or third. That should just set him up well for where he goes next. So I respect the heck out of him, the horse to beat, but for me, not the horse to bet.
Well, let's throw up our picks for this race. And as you were alluding to earlier, Gino, you've got some interest in the number 8, Smok and Teague, who even not being able to explain the last race, and they can make some good points about the time off since then and his work pattern coming in here. And, the fact that there is no significant layoff, maybe he's a horse who can bounce back to those better races. And no argument from me. His good races put him squarely in the mix.
And I think after More Than Looks, there's a next tier of horses that are all very comparable. I think when you're talking about horses like Irish Aces, like Big Everest, like Smok and Teague, like the two who you like a little bit, Forever Super, I have them all kind of in that next tier. And if I'm playing this race individually, I'm going to look at the prices of those horses. And if a horse like the two, Forever Super, who I don't have, if he floats up a little bit and maybe he's 8-1 and one of these other horses get bet because Irish Aces, maybe people bet off the Trouble Trip and he floats down, maybe I gravitate a little towards Forever Super. But I'm looking between horses in that next tier to who is the value in here. And for me, I think if Smok and Teague is around 5-1, that offers us fair value on last year's winner.
I thought long and hard about the number 7, Pioneering Spirit, who I do think is going to be double-digit odds in this race, and there are things to like about him as we covered. But I did ultimately put the number 2, Forever Super, on top. Just a horse who's in great form. And when I kept drawing up different scenarios for how this race might be run, I kept looking at him as a horse that was going to work out the right trip no matter what. He's drawn well and he's very versatile. So I think Forever Super is a horse that is dangerous in the lure stakes. Gino has the number 8, Smok and Teague, on top in race 9 at Saratoga on Saturday. Good luck if you're playing the races this weekend.